continuing our team coverage now with defense attorneys Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean. Bob?
Trace DNA.
Well, and Sian, what happened this morning has really inflamed the opinions of a lot of legal minds around town, including our experts, Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean. And Jeff, let me turn to you first, because you were telling me that you're actually doing a death penalty case right now. And the big issue is, how thorough do these expert reports have to be? How many opinions, all of the opinions do you have to furnish? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I can understand the judge's frustration with not disclosing opinions, because quite frankly, most of the work we're doing with the prosecution that's involved in the case that we're handling, we speak to them all the time. My partner's the lead counsel in this case. He probably talks to the prosecution 2 or 3 times a week, more often than that sometimes. We've disclosed just in our case probably close to 200 witnesses. We're doing preliminary reports that we're turning over with the knowledge that they're not going to be able to speak to all 170 people that we have. So they ask us questions about our witnesses. We communicate freely with them because this is serious. We're talking about somebody's life here, and we're going to trial with somebody's life at stake. And so we're not playing games. Here's what our doctors say. Here's what our experts say. Here's what we have to tell you. We're discussing this case. We're probably months away from trial, and we're discussing this case out in the open because this is not the time for that kind of gamesmanship.
Well, and Richard, isn't at the heart of this issue the lack of communication or the strained communications between Jose Baez and Jeff Ashton? And aren't we seeing some of that coming to bear now?
It always comes back to Jose Baez's inexperience. There's no doubt about that. But I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to probably differ from everybody else out there. I think a lot of the blame has to be put at the feet of Judge Perry. Because here's the thing, Bob. The Florida Supreme Court has recognized that capital cases are extremely special cases that should not be handled by rookies. They have specifically passed a rule that mandates minimum standards for attorneys to handle capital cases. And the lead counsel in a capital case is supposed to meet those minimum standards, which everybody knows Baez does not meet. So they bring in Cheney Mason. However, Cheney Mason really is not acting as lead counsel in this case. He's not even acting as second chair. And it begs the question, why hasn't Judge Perry required Cheney Mason to act as the lead attorney in this case, especially on the important matters? Why hasn't Judge Perry held Cheney Mason accountable? And you go back to Judge Perry let the other 2 attorneys off, Andrea Lyon and Linda Kidney-Bodden, who are supposed to be these experienced defense death penalty attorneys, let them off without so much as a tongue lashing or a real explanation of why they thought the state should have paid them when they originally got on before she was declared indigent. And so a lot of Judge Perry's I guess willful blindness to what was going on in the Casey Anthony defense is coming back to bite him, and I almost say he brought it upon himself, and that's why he's not excluding witnesses. He realizes he didn't do a proper colloquy with Casey Anthony to make sure she understood that Jose Baez was not qualified to handle a death penalty case.
But Jeff Dean, let me ask you this, because you had said you thought Jose Baez was making a good point by saying he thinks this is tactical movement on the part of the prosecution to try to limit the scope of his case by choosing to not do depositions. Do you agree with that?
I do, kind of. Bob, there is never a case in which you interview your expert some months, maybe a year in advance of the trial. You get preliminary opinions, you think you know exactly what that person's going to say, and then the trial testimony begins, and you start to hear things that are nuancing or changing just slightly. And then you go to your expert and you bring him the actual facts of the testimony that has been in the trial, and you say, what about this? What about A? What about C? What about B? And he changes his approach maybe, and now Jeff Ashton goes in and says, it's not in the report, it's not in the report. And my response to him would be, you didn't take a deposition because you didn't take one. That was a tactic. If you didn't take one, then that's what you get.
Go ahead, Richard.
And Bob, it sums up this. That's why a report is 5 pages long, maximum maybe, but depositions are 100 or 200 pages because the other side is supposed to ask every single probing question, and Jeff Ashton specifically didn't do it, and I think he's getting what he asked for in this case, and he's trying to use it to a woman that's facing the death penalty. It's wrong.
All right. Richard Hornsby, Jeff Dean,
wrong.
thank you very much. Appreciate that. It was an interesting comment from Jose Baez where he said that Jeff Ashton was not only trying to, in essence, take his client's life, but then he said, now he's trying to go after her attorney. So there's a lot of bad blood here, and hopefully things can cool off a little bit more before we reconvene at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Reporting live from our courthouse studio, I'm Bob Keeling, West 2 News.